Okay. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of our court, Professor Alexi, the Council of State and the Jurisdiction of Administrative Litigation, first of all, I'd like to give you a warm welcome to our country, to our city, to this place. Thank you for accepting this interview, this conversation. We appreciate very much. This dialogue will focus on three aspects. The first one will attempt to get to know some few aspects of your life. The second and most relevant one will look at for your work, of course. And the third part is what we call here in this interview scheme, your miracles. Therefore, our conversation will address your life, your work, and your miracles. Let's talk about your life first. First of all, I understand you wanted to become a painter, but then you enrolled in the army, in the German army. Would you like to tell us some more about that, please?
Without microphone?
Yes. You have a microphone.
I have, yes. Yeah. When I was young, I did not want it to become a lawyer or something like this. I wanted to become an artist. I thought that the only great form of human life is the life as an artist. And from about 16 to 19, I made nothing else. I had to go to school, naturally, but I made nothing else than painting, day and night. And in the end of this period, I had 2 exhibitions of my works in Göttingen, and if I was very happy, I sold all. But then the time came when I had to go, in any case, in Germany, to the army for 1.5 years. But I wanted to study after my army time, and in Germany that was 65. Then Germany was not a such rich country as it is now. The Second World War, which destroyed Germany nearly completely, had still some consequences. And my father has been, after the Second World War, some problems. He was a German officer, was all the 6 years in all countries from Russia to the medieval sea. And he had earned not very much money in these years. And we have been 4 children, and my father told me, well, I have difficulties to finance your university time. And then I said to him, Papa, don't mind, I will care for it. And then I went for 3 years in the army and got about, I cannot say it exactly, something like today between $30,000 or $40,000 US dollars. That was the money. And the crazy thing was, I did not need this money. For a short time after 68, at the Göttingen University, which was a wonderful university, they gave me a scholarship because I make a good impression, and I did not need it all the money. I was a very rich student. As young students, I traveled with my girlfriend, which I married later, to Venice, for she wanted to sit together with me in a gondola. And if I had not this money, that would not be possible. Therefore, it was not so bad that I was in the army. Well, that is just some remarks on this.
The best student from the beginning. You was the best student from the beginning. So you went to the University of Göttingen. what inspired you to study law and philosophy, Professor?
Well, when I went to Göttingen, I did not start it with law. I enrolled in Göttingen with literature, German literature, Germanistik we call it, literature, history, and philosophy. And I liked philosophy very much as it was taught in Göttingen, but it was rather boring what they made in literature. It was not scientific enough for my taste. And then I discussed the problem with my philosophy teacher, Günther Patzig, a great name. And a good luck for me that I had him as a philosophy teacher. And then he told to me, well, Robert Alexi, remain with philosophy, but take a second discipline, which is scientifically more serious than literature and history. And he said mathematics or physics or economy or even law, he said, or even law. And then I tested all these things, and I liked law very much. And I decided to remain with philosophy, and I had the obligation to have a second discipline, and I decided to connect philosophy with law. And that was the beginning of my way to legal philosophy.
At that time, Professor, I have heard about some story that we would like to know something about. Habermas was willing you to take at your age to the Max Planck Institute. How was that story?
Well, I must add something, or this is a further question. The way I studied philosophy.
Yes.
The way I studied philosophy in Göttingen in this time, and it was a great luck for me, where besides Munich, where Stegmüller taught, and Göttingen, were the best places in Germany to study analytical philosophy. And I studied analytical philosophy, but normally you either study analytical philosophy, that is Gottlob Frege, mathematical logic, linguistic analysis, and all these strict things, or you study something like critical theory, that is Adorno, Jürgen Habermas, Horkheimer, and so on. But I liked both, and my teacher, analytical teacher, Patzig, told me, Alexi, you are crazy to read the books of Habermas. It makes no sense to read only one sentence of him. He changed his mind later. He changed his mind. But in this time, he said this to me. And then I made my law exam in Göttingen. And Habermas, I had already had discussions with Habermas, meetings on some conferences. And Habermas asked me to send to him my doctoral dissertation, Theory of Legal Argumentation. And she liked the book. Habermas arranged the publication with Surkamp. It was not my idea. And Habermas invited me to come to Starnberg and to become there an assistant in Starnberg, where the Max Planck, very important, very rich institute, Max Planck Institute for research on the life conditions in the technical modern world. And they asked me to become, that would have been the consequences, they asked me to habilitate after a dissertation in Germany. You must write a second book, the habilitation, in order to be allowed to become a professor. And Habermas asked me to write my habilitation in philosophy. And then I would become a pure philosopher. And that was a very difficult situation for me. I had to decide to stay connected, to stay in philosophy, but connected with law, or to say goodbye law and become a philosopher. I asked Habermas to give me 14 days to decide this question. That was the worst 14 days in my life. I did not know what to do. But I'm now, if I look back, I am very happy that I have not said goodbye to the law. If I would have, I would not have the great pleasure to sit here today and to talk to you.
Later we will talk about the theory of legal argumentation, but let's return to 1976. At that time, you received your PhD, started with the dissertation, A Theory of Legal Argumentation. What drove you to pick this subject matter? Who were your main mentors and academic influences at that time?
Well, this book is the result of two things. In philosophy, in analytical philosophy, there was a great discussion, an old and great discussion. The traditional logical analytical philosophy had the opinion that statements about morality and justice are poor ideology. They have nothing to do with correctness or truth. There was a Marxist line, there was the line of Hans Kelsen too, and Ayer, Carnap, nearly all intellectuals in the years about 1930 to 1960 were relativists and skepticists. But there was a movement then that has the name Good Reason Approach. And that fascinated me. That we can, the question of whether there exists a difference between good and bad arguments. Or the alternative would be, if I would be a real skeptic, then I must say all arguments put forward have the same quality. But I think it is nearly evident that there can be good and bad arguments. And if this should be true, then radical skepticism, radical meta-ethical skepticism would be wrong. That was my way to the theory of argumentation in general. And if you look in the book, Theory of Legal Argumentation, the first greatest part is nearly purely philosophical. And then comes, that is what I said. And I combined there analytical, logical analysis with critical theory, that is the discourse theory of Jürgen Habermas, which is a very interesting theory from the point of view of good reasons approach. And the second point is, naturally, as a jurist, I was interested what are good and bad arguments in legal discourse, in the justification of legal decisions. And I studied intensively in German, juristische Methodenlehre, the theory of legal methods. And the state of affair was horrible, mainly influenced by very unclear things about legal hermeneutics. Heidegger was extremely influenced in this area, and his student Gadamer, Heidegger, Gadamer, and this line. I think the hermeneutics are true when they say all argument must be considered. That is true, but that is not enough. We need to explore exactly the forms of arguments of the legal discourse. And that was what I was now interested in, and that is the second part, in which I connected this. And so I proposed for the general practical discourse 28 rules and forms of general practical argumentation. Habermas later took over the most important them into his work, and I presented an analysis of the forms and rules of legal argumentation, which I developed on and on up to today. That is the structure of this book.
Thank you, Professor. What did you choose the University of Kiel to carry out your work as a professor and jurist?
So, after I made my habilitation with my second book, Theory of Constitutional Rights, in 1984, and then I was 39 years old, and if you are habilitated in Germany, your time at university ends. And therefore it is a very risky career. The only possibility to remain in the academic area is that there is another university. You cannot become a professor at the university where you have been habilitated. In order to protect the university against all forms of nepotism and so on. You must be successful in the academic market, in the free academic market. And there are many tragic academic careers in Germany of persons who were never, after their habilitation, successful in the academic market. But I had good luck, as sometimes more in my life. I immediately after my habilitation got offers of 2 universities, Regensburg and Kiel. And my wife, she died 4 to 5 years ago. My wife was a teacher. And the state of Schleswig-Holstein, we have 16 states in the Federal Republic of Germany. The minister, the official minister of Schleswig-Holstein, gave me in written form, if you come to Kiel, your wife can become a teacher at the school and at the time she chooses. In Bavaria, they told me, we will try all we can to give your wife a position at the school in Bavaria, but nothing is sure. For me, I needed no more argument than to say I did not want it that she become, what is the English expression, a housewife or a housewoman. And to prevent this, I went to Kiel, and then I get offers from other universities in the years after, again and again. Even an offer to Göttingen, but I remained there for, I had good opportunities. For instance, my chair in Kiel, in the end, if you get an offer from another university, you go have negotiations. You get more assistance, more money for books, more private money in these negotiations. And I had, at the end of my time, 13 rooms. That was my chair, 13 rooms. And they were all full. You know, it's full with students from all over the world, and that was one of the reasons why I could work in Kiel so well.
I think it wasn't a good luck for you. It's just your talent, Professor, to be in Kiel. Now that you have retired from the University of Kiel, what is next for an accomplished and well-established intellectual such as yourself, Professor? Again, now that you are retired from Kiel, what are you doing now? That's what I mean. What is next for an well-established professor and intellectual person like you?
Well, I continue my work. I have a wonderful, great office in the university. for Kiel wants to prevent that I go to another place in spite of the fact that I'm retired. They want to have me there. And I work harder than in early years. As sometimes I work, I think I must go the next week to an exam. That is, I have to write so many lectures when I travel around the world. But I enjoy it. I enjoy this, and in order to elaborate, and I have many unsolved questions. Many unsolved questions. I know I will never solve all questions, but some I will solve. Yes.
Okay, Professor, let's talk about the work.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there are three main areas in which your work has had a significant impact. Mm-hmm. Legal theory, especially legal argumentation, constitutional theory, especially constitutional rights theory, and legal philosophy, especially the concept and the validity of law. Can these contributions be understood as a whole, connected in an articulated manner? Indeed, talking about your own work, you have remarked that, quote, the result may well be a system, quote. How can this system be explained, Professor?
Yes. When I started to work scientifically, I had the opinion, as nearly all had in these years, in the high years of analytical philosophy, that the time of systems has been gone away. We cannot nowadays, nearly everybody told it in the philosophy scene as I know it, we cannot any longer have a system as in the classical tradition of philosophy was the highest aim. And when I wrote the theory of legal argumentation, I did not believe in systems. I wanted only to write some true sentences, nothing else. But if I look back, I see that the main element of my system was already present there. I did not notice it. That is the law's claim to correctness. That is the decisive point of whether law is merely a formalized power system, or that is whether law has only this real dimension, or whether law has also an ideal or critical dimension with a claim to correctness. That I already had in the argumentation theory. And then, and that was very concrete, it was orientated on the legal practice, how to write a good justification of a legal decision. That was my question. Then I get the next step to the theory of constitutional rights. And in my theory of constitutional rights, I became much more systematically for constitutional rights or fundamental rights are the core of each and any acceptable legal system. Now I have already the core, the basis, and the concept of the system. But in these years, I did not reflect it on the basis of necessity, the question of necessity. There are elements in the theory of constitutional rights which can be read as a relativistic or particularistic universal approach. That is, the Western approach orientated on human rights, but there may be other constitutional systems which are not orientated on constitutional rights, but only on collective goods. That was now my new point. a closer analysis of what correctness in law means. And my thesis now is, in my third book, The Concept and Validity of Law, that a core of fundamental rights is necessary for all legal systems. For all legal systems. And I have even elaborated a short article translated by Figueroa into Spain. Data, you know Data on Star Trek? Star Trek, Data, from Star Trek. Data is an android, a kind of a computer which looks like a man. And there was a lawsuit in the universe, far away from us. And in the lecture I will give here, written very new, it's only some months old, I apply my argument from my article 10 years old, Data and Human Rights, Positronic Brain, and Double Triadic Concept of a Person. And I said that data has human rights in spite of the fact that he is not a human being. And I will not explain it now here. Then when reading again Kant, I saw that Kant already used this when he said, all human beings, all human beings, and then he adds in the second section of the groundwork of the metaphysics of morals, all human beings and all reasonable beings have human dignity, have dignity. He dissolved the concept of dignity from the concept of human being and connected it with the concept of reasonable being. Therefore, my theory applies not only to our sun system, but to the whole universe. That is a really universalistic theory.
Okay, Professor, let's go back to the first book you wrote. I mean, a theory of legal argumentation. As you wrote three books, I'd like to talk about the first. This book maybe is one of the most discussed and prestigious, translating to many languages, by the way, like English by Neil McCormick and Spanish by Manuel Atienza, but also has been translated to Italian, Portuguese, Chinese, Korean, even Lithuanian. That's amazing. Has the original version you presented as your doctoral dissertation, your thesis, in 1976, changes after years of criticism and accolades?
Well, the main thesis remains. The main thesis remained, but already some years later, after the first publication, I have written a new postscript in which I made some corrections, and it would be impossible. It's impossible to write as a young student a book to which you can say your whole life it was perfect what I have made. For instance, just a very simple point. I had some years ago, I have written an article published in Finland, some reflections on what changed in my work in the last decennia. And for instance, in the theory of legal argumentation, I had not the distinction between rules and principles, which has become later so important, yes, for my theory of legal argumentation. But if you look, as I wrote, very carefully, and we talked yesterday evening about this, you find an elementary form of one of the two laws of the theory of constitutional rights, that is the law of collegiate principles, the preference relation. There I did not work with the concept of the principle, but with the concept of the rule. That it was not good, but I had conditioned and absolute relations of preference already there. I did not notice it when I wrote it, but that is the normal way in scientific work that you must correct you again and again. I'm always correcting myself, and in the lecture I make here, I also, but I had the great luck. I never had I would do it immediately. I would do it immediately. I never had to say everything I have made up to now has been nonsense. I make a new start. That is not my fault.
Professor, in this first book, again, you hold that the legal discourse is a special case of general practical discourse. Could you explain us, please, this special case thesis?
The special case had been very severely attacked, and I have here with me a manuscript I'm just starting, and which I have to present already in 3 weeks in Graz in Austria. Peter Koller organizes a book about Habermas' facticity, facts and value, facticity and
Fact and norms.
Yes, facts and norms. And we have a book series in Germany, interpreting classics. When they asked me to write in this book something, there are 10 or 12 persons, and each had to write a commentary on one section of Habermas' book. I first said no, because nobody may be called a classic when he is still living. And fortunately, Habermas is still living. Therefore, we cannot make this book. But then they said to me, we have decided to make it, and you must do this. Well, and in this chapter 5, Habermas attacked my special case thesis. And he said that, and you has formulated it correctly, the special case thesis says that legal argumentation is the special case of general practical argumentation. Habermas interprets my special case thesis as the thesis legal argumentation is a special case of moral argumentation. Moral argumentation is only a part of general practical argumentation. General practical argumentation consists of 3 levels. Natural morality, that is justice and universalizability, as we find it, for instance, in Kant. Then, the ethical level. That is the question, what kind of persons we want to be, and in what kind of society we want to be. And even in cases of questions of justice, we must have consideration of identity. The question of whether we are a liberal or even libertarian society in which everybody cares only for himself, tries to maximize its utility, or whether we are communicative, we have responsibles for the weak and poor persons, has not only to do with justice as an abstract principle, as has to do with my personal identity, how live I in this society, and our collective identity. Therefore, moral question, and Habermas makes a strict separation between these two levels. Questions of justice even depend. And then the pragmatical level, and again use Habermas, is means and calculation. We must organize our society as effective as possible. And effectivity, science without effectivity, an ineffective society, has great problems. That is a new idea I in this moment have. I will use it in my article. That is a connection theory. And ineffective science has great difficulties to be a just science. For the more ineffective a society is, the less have to distribute. Therefore, that is general practical discourse, and that is my first point for the special case thesis. And the legal discourse. The legal discourse is the second point. The legal discourse is necessary for moral reasons. For if we would solve in societies all problems without law, we would have the problem of anarchy, we would have the problems that some people abide by the law, follow the law, and others not. In order to, that are the two Kantian arguments for the necessity of law. That is, to, and the third argument is to have the advantages of social cooperation and coordination. We cannot have this without law. And the requirements, avoiding of anarchy or civil law. We know a lot of failed states in the world. A failed state is also a moral mistake. Anarchy is a moral mistake. That people are allowed not to follow law and reason is a moral default. And the same with coordination and cooperation. That is, law is not, as some people have said, especially all in the wake of anarchism. Law is not something which is a little bit bad from a moral point of view. Law is required from a moral point of view. That is, legal discourse is a general practical discourse which is connected or bound by the statutes, bound by the precedents, and bound on the main results of dogmatic analysis. That is the authoritative side of the law. But law has not only this side, because it has this claim to correctness. And with this, the law has inside its argumentation, moral argument, that is justice. When I talk about moral or general practical, I mean mainly arguments concerning justice. And it has on the basis morality, and that is my second reason, the basic argument for the special case thesis. That is my point. I have a further point, but I think I have said enough to do this point.
Okay, let's see the second book a little bit. This theory of constitutional rights was published in 1985. Was your habilitation thesis, by the way. And again, was translated into many languages, Spanish, English, Korean, Portuguese, and this time Polish. There are three main points in that book. First, rules and principles. Second, proportionality analysis in the law of balancing. And third, the structure of balancing and the weight formula. There you state that principles are optimization requirements, and that balancing is the specific form of their application, for which you develop three sub-principles: suitability, necessity, and proportionality in the narrower sense. Could you explain to us how judges should apply them and to which kind of cases?
Well, the main norm-theoretical thesis of the theory of constitutional rights is indeed the distinction between rules and principles. And fundamental rights as optimization requirements require indeed all three stages of proportionality analysis. The principle of suitability, just to give you an example, and it's very important. It sounded a little bit as I would have invented the three stages of proportionality analysis. I have not invented it. It has been mainly invented by the German Constitutional Court, but the first elements we have had in the adjudication in administrative law in Prussia during the time of the Emperor Wilhelm II on, say, I don't know exactly, 1892.
A long time.
Yes, that was the question in police law. A measurement must be suited to achieve its end. And we have a very small number of cases in administrative law, and I'm always very happy when I find one in the adjudication in which the state has made a decision which is which uses an unsuitable means for an end. We have in the decisions of the Federal Constitutional Court the most famous decision on this point, that is that people who hunter, not with a gun, but with a bird, a falcon, yes, falcon, and the hunter lobby in this day in our old capital Bonn hated the falconers and wanted to have them out of the woods. And therefore, they arranged that the falconers had to make a shooting examination in order to be allowed to be falconers. The falconers community went to the Federal Constitutional Court, and they said the shooting test requirement is unconstitutional because it is not suitable to protect either the animals or human beings in the wood. For they cannot make great danger only for very small animals with the falcon. They are not a danger if they have, it is completely senseless to have a shooting examination for falconers. But such a crazy legislation we have seldom in Germany, therefore these cases are so rare. In this case, you can optimize. That is a very important point. For this is a kind, the first two sentences is a kind of Pareto optimality. That is Wilfredo Pareto, one of the most important around 1900 period also, a very economist. He invented the concept of Pareto optimality, which is up to today, with much refinements, one of the bases of economy. For instance, in the Falconer case, the fundamental right of the falconer can be given greater room, optimized more, without any costs for the life and security of visitors of the wood, human visitor and animals. Therefore, it is not necessary. So this interference with the freedom of the falconers is not necessary. Therefore, it is unconstitutional. The other thing is, the second level is also, that is optimization relative to the factual possibilities. I can make a better realization of two colliding principles. One principle can be better realized without any costs for the other one. That is Pareto optimality. The second case, to make it as short as possible, is the Santa Claus decision. That concerned that Santa Clauses and Easter hares, Osterhasen, these animals with the long hairs. In Germany, children get these things in chocolate at Easter and Christmas. But now there was a law, not a law, but a regulation made by the Ministry of Economy to protect consumers. That is the principle of protection of consumers. There was a danger, and the German Finance Ministry has now in the European financial crisis greater problem than this, the Santa Claus problem. There was producers of Santa Clauses which produced them not in chocolate, but as a kind of rice and other materials, which you could not detect that it's not chocolate. It is sweet, a little bit sweet, but not original chocolate. And now there immediately came up a danger. A mother loving her daughter, wants to give her a chocolate Santa Claus at Christmas evening. And he has, as we in German say, Hofreis Santa Claus, not made of chocolate. Therefore, the not chocolate Santa Clauses and Eastern hair were legally forbidden. It was forbidden. And here the court said that is disproportional too, because the strict ban on non-chocolate Eastern hairs, and please, proportionality analysis is much more serious than the chocolate Santa Clauses. But often, simple cases are, from a logical point of view, very good to illustrate a logical structure. That is my point. And they said it is not necessary. It would be sufficient for the protection of consumer that they have a warning on it. Warning, not chocolate. That was a less serious interference with the rights of the producers of the Santa Clauses, and the nearly as good protection of the principle of the consumer's rights. But again, we have here, and that is my first point. There's a great discussion about whether it is true of whether constitutional rights are optimization requirements. I have many, many enemies to these cases. Jürgen Habermas is one of them. Böckenförde is one of them. Bernhard Schlink is one of them. Poscher is one of them. Gehstedt is one of them. I could continue and continue. They think if we understand constitutional rights as proportionality, in the sense of proportionality and analysis, that is as optimization requirements, a wall breaks down, and constitutional rights lose their binding power. And they add to this, balancing is irrational. That are the two main arguments. Well, in any case, even Bernhard Schlink, who attacks my theory most hard, agrees that as optimization requirements at the level of suitability and necessity, the optimization thesis applies. Things become serious if one of the colliding rights or principles must pay a price. In the Falkner case and the Santa Claus case, no side had to pay a price. But in the case, for instance, of abortion, one side has to pay a price. The mother, concerning her personality right, or the unborn, paying with its life. That are the serious cases. That are the cases of proportionality analysis in the narrower sense. And that is not empirical optimization with relation to empirical facts, but optimization with respect to normative questions. And in order to resolve this problem, I developed in my theory of constitutional rights two laws. The law of balancing and the law of colliding principles. In order to show that balancing, that is my main thesis. It was not so clear in the book that I elaborated in the last years. Balancing is a form of rational legal argumentation. And you can explicate this form of argumentation by a mathematical formula. That is the weight formula. The weight formula I developed, say, 12 years ago, first published, is not to be found in the theory of constitutional rights, but the weight formula is the same as the law of balancing in the theory of constitutional rights in a highly elaborated form. And this year, in January, when I was at a conference in Geneva, I made a new version. I had to give a lecture in the midst of February in Belo Horizonte about formal principles, and there I developed the refined weight formula. The classic weight formula has 3 variables on each side. The refined weight formula has 4 variables on each side. It's impossible to explain it completely here, but I found in this January in Genua, and it was my luckiest day of this year. Perhaps a better day will still come, but up to now was this the best day, or say best night I had in this year. I invented that according to the refined weight formula, in cases of balancing, if we use my triadic scale, we have 6,561 constellations concerning the values of the two sides. And that is one of the reasons why balancing is so complex, but this complexity, if you use this analytical instrument, can be resolved. And just one further remark is absolutely necessary. Gottlob Frege, after Aristotle, the most important logician, published in 1879 his Begriffsschrift, concept writing. And there he compared mathematical logic, he was a mathematician, mathematical logic with a microscope, which allows the doctor to see things which he cannot see with his mere eyes. I think that is true. But Frege then stressed, if a doctor, however, would try to look at everything with a microscope, he builds a microscope before his eyes and tries to drive home with his car with a microscope before his eyes, he would not be successful. That is, the weight formula should not be, is only a means to inform about the structure of balancing. It should not be applied in a legal decision. There have been some courts, and it was not too bad. For instance, the High Administrative Court in Lisbon, they quote it, and they work directly with the formula. That should not be done. For this formula made it possible to say, now it's the to say with normal language, once we have understood, have full insight about the structure of this argument, then we can say in normal language things very short, very clear, and we can be short in simple case, more elaborate in others. The weight formula says us which 4 points on each side we had to treat. And perhaps, for instance, Carlos Bernal, who studied considerable time with me in Kiel, Carlos Bernal has proposed that there should, he is the translator in the Spanish version, that some more elements. And I have now, and I was so unsure, I have, let me see, after, yes, 18 years, nearly 20 years, I needed, before, I always thought about, should I insert a fourth variable or not? And I was not sure of whether I should do it. The formula works very well with 3 variables. But it is complete only with 4. And I needed so long time. And that is my point. And in the end, what you have to insert. How intensive is the interference with the one right? That is the first variable. On the other side, how intensive is the interference if you, in the second right, if you make no interference in the first right. And then you need a scale, series, and so on. And then you cannot, we have no instrument of measurement. That is, in physics, chemistry, and these sciences different. But we must say the interference is light. For instance, in most cases this works. I like to study judication. For instance, in the European jurisdiction of the German Federal Constitutional Court, 90% or even more use even these words or other synonyms for this. And mostly they work with a triadic scale. Sometimes our Constitutional Court works with a dual state, only light and serious. Sometimes with a refined scale, instead of serious, very serious, extremely serious, very light. They make refinements on the ends. That's all possible, naturally. But the decisive point is, you must justify your judgment of whether the interference is serious or light. For instance, in the case of electronic screenings, that is, all the police and the Secret Service in Germany had, according to a statute, the right to get dates from all authorities, even of all universities. And the police demanded all dates of male students, not of female students. That's the case of discrimination. All dates of female students between 18 and 14, according to what their religion is, how often they traveled in which land, say to Afghanistan, Iraq, or Syria, what is their religion, and so on. And then these dates were elected, that were some 100,000, even 1 million. Then the computer filtered out of this, say, 300 persons, and this 300, and the other persons were for a minimum, 1,000 still, or even 100,000 a second, only run to the computer. And then this 3,000 were explored according to traditional police methods. I don't talk about this 6,000. I don't talk about them. I talk about the 300,000 or million who are for a very small time run through the computer. 8 of our judges said that is a serious interference with the right to personality of all persons who run through the computer series. And the argumentation, that's a simple sentence. It is a series. That is the value, that is in this case the value 4. 4 has to be inserted, but not because there is a value 4, but because it is a series. Judge Haas, in her dissenting vote, said it was a light interference. And the reason for this light interference is very serious, the fight against terrorism. The majority said the reasons for the interference are only medium or light, for there was no actual, only an abstract danger. No actual. That is this, there you have two values, and the majority needed 30 pages to justify, and here we are completely back in the theory of legal argumentation, which I started. We are back in the theory of argumentation, 13 pages arguments for the serious character of the interference with the right to personality. And Judge Haas, the dissenter, needed 10 pages to justify that the interference was only light, and so on. That is just an example, And I would say balancing is possible if sentences like the interference is light, the interference is medium, the interference is serious, can be backed by argument. This backing by argument does not mean that always a consensus must be there. But that man can say, well, it is quite plausible, we have it now, and very often we have such dissenting votes, and 10 or 20 years later, they change the precedents, and they say, oh, that was a mistake, we should have said that were light and not serious, or serious and not light. But that is a normal progress in the legal culture, and for that reason, I think that balancing is not only allowed when fundamental rights are concerned, but also necessary.
You say, Professor, by the way, that you had a lucky day. But I think that the real lucky day is going to be on next Friday, because I understand that you are going to visit again the weight formula. Can we get some advice of that, please?
What?
Next Friday, you are going to explain again the
weight formula.
The weight formula. And it's supposed that you are going to revisit that weight formula. No? It's the same?
It's the same. I need the refined weight formula um, for to solve a problem I have not solved up to now, or up to this year. There is a deep debate. Many people, and our court, our constitutional court, has the proportionality analysis. Proportionality analysis is now practiced nearly in all supreme or constitutional courts over the world, with one exception, the Supreme Court of the United States. They are up to now resistant against proportionality analysis, but my argument is they make a hidden proportionality analysis, and I'm very happy that they now at the Harvard Law School make in next March a conference about proportionality analysis. That is the first time that the United States, they wanted to hear from me that and that and that, but never proportionality analysis. That they thought is poison for the United States legal system. Perhaps times will change. But let's see. I have here a problem. Our court is completely unclear about human dignity as the highest value of the Constitution, of the application of the norm of human dignity allows or even requires proportionality analysis. Many people say in Germany, perhaps even more than 50%, that human dignity is an absolute right. If a right is an absolute right, that I have developed in the theory of constitutional right, if a right is an absolute right, the concept of interference in this right becomes the same or synonymous with the concept of violation. If human dignity is an absolute right, then every interference with human dignity would be automatically, analytically, be a violation of human dignity. Balancing is not possible. But if it is a relative right, that is an optimization requirement, then there can be interferences with human dignity which are no violation because good reasons exist for this interference. The most easiest case here is when on both sides of the conflict human dignity is to be found. Then it is quite crazy to say balancing is not allowed. Well, but I will not give the lecture of next Friday here. I simply want to say, therefore it is a funny story. I like it, and I needed the kind of but it is a very funny thing that I could give a list of decisions in which our court said it is an absolute right, and I could also present a list of decisions in which the same court says it is a relative right. If this is the case in an adjudication, that is a good sign that there must be at least a small problem.
So next Friday is going to be our lucky day for for the explanation. Okay, Professor. Let's maybe. Yes.
I think we shall stop.
No. It's an advertisement for other things. No. In your third book, The Concern and the Validity of Law, published in 1992, by the way, was translated into English as The Argument from Injustice. Maybe the major achievement is to bring clarity into the debate between positivism and non-positivism concept of law. In the core of this debate, you explain that the relationship between law and morality, and you claim the special correlation called the weak relationship thesis. Could you explain this more there, please?
Yes. Yes, in this book, I tried to solve the problems I have always dealt with on an as abstract or philosophical level as possible. And in a short way. It is a very short book.
Short but substantial. Short but very substantial book.
In my life, my life has twice experience. I like to publish in US American journals, but I have twice the experience that they did not accept an article of mine because they said it is too short. Too short, only 12 pages, that's impossible. We cannot publish it. And I always tell it to everybody, what you can write short. Write everything as short as it can be written. But if you look at the American law journals, they have articles with small print of 80 pages. That is more than my book, Concept and Validity of Law. Yes. Now, in this book, I had not the distinctions I have developed in the last years between three forms of non-positivism. When I talk about non-positivism, I talk exactly about what is in the tradition called natural law. But I prefer the more neutral concept, non-positivism, because natural law is only one kind of non-positivism. There are other kinds of non-positivism. All non-positivisms say that there exists, and that is the decisive point, a necessary relation between law and morality, that is law and justice, necessary. Positivists like Hans Kelsen or Herbert Hart or others, with one exception, Joseph Ratz and his students, they say there is a possible connection. Naturally, can the parliament or the framers of the constitution, naturally they can incorporate moral contents, and very often they do, into law. That is what Judith Coleman calls inclusive positivism. But I think that there is a weak connection for two reasons. And to understand these two reasons, you must make, as so often in sciences, a distinction. There is a strong connection. In this cases, I call this the classifying connection. A violation of justice has a consequence of the loss of validity. The norm is not a legally valid norm, and my form of the Radbruch formula is extreme injustice is no law. That is, for instance, the parts of the Nazi law. We had a nice decision of the highest civil court. There was a Jewish immigrant which had a bank depot in Germany. It's the Deutsche Bank, a very big bank depot. After 1945, she came back to Germany, and there was a time limit. I think up to 1952. The property of the Jewish immigrants became, by law, not by a single executive act, by law, property of the German Reich. And the Federal Republic of Germany is identical with the German Reich. Not the follower, but identical, only another organization and name. That is, the property of this Jewish emigrant was now property of the Federal Republic of Germany. And the court said, well, you have had the opportunity up to 1952 to apply for giving back this bank depot to you, but you had forgotten. You did not know. The German court said, all levels, well, she had lost the property, he cannot get it back. But then the highest civil court, that was a decision, I don't know exactly, of 1959, I think the decision said, the 11th regulation from 1941, paragraph 3, in which you could read, immigrants, Jews, properties, goes over to the German Reich. Could read this sentence. The highest civil court said, this norm never was a legally valid norm. Never. Therefore, she never lost the property on the bank depot. And therefore, the German Bundesrepublik has given back the bank depot to her. That is an example, just to explain that I deal not only with a philosophical problem, but with an extremely practical problem after the breakdown of a rough or injustice system. And we have other decisions. But I don't say, therefore I don't say that every unjust law loses validity. That would open the door to arbitrariness and anarchy, because the question of what is just and what is unjust is often deeply contested. Only in the case of extreme injustice, my case I presented, we can be sufficiently sure on this point. Therefore, my form only extreme. But then, and that is important, but then we have a second point. We have not only the classifying connection, the consequences of it, which are the loss of legal validity, we also have the qualifying connection. And now, we must be very, very careful, because many people lost this point. All the positivists, the great positivists, like Kelsen, Hart, or Ratz, all of them say morally unjust norms are morally unjust. And I think they are right. But I think that is trivial. For why should trivial? All morally unjust, all unjust norms are unjust. No information, but truth. That is the positivistic point. They say they are the unjust norms are incorrect only from a point external to law. They are unjust only from the moral point of view, but not from the legal point of view. And my point here is, all morally incorrect norms are legally incorrect. That is a great difference, and which has also some, but if the moral incorrectness is below the threshold of extreme injustice, the statute is at the same time legally valid and legally incorrect. And that is the tragic in the life of a jurist, that he sometimes has to apply a legally valid norm which is legally incorrect. And naturally, and that now come back to legal argumentation, that is a nearly paradox, or we can describe it, the situation as paradox, or even as a little bit tragic. Even as a little bit tragic. And now we can put the next question, but my answer has already been much too complicated. And we can now think how, with the means of legal argumentation, we can get out of this semi-paradox situation of being forced to say legally valid, but legally incorrect. But that is my connection of law and morality.
Okay, Professor, we have talked about your three books, your three main books. Now I'd like to return to some, very briefly.
Yes.
Three debates that you have stand out with working with Atienza and with Habermas again. Mm-hmm. What is the difference between the right answer, the Dworkin's right answer, and your right answer?
Mm-hmm. Well, Dworkin has become very famous with this thesis, and he says that there exists he not only says that there exists a single right answer in each legal case or question, but he also says that if we were intelligent enough, that is his Judge Hercules, superhuman intelligence, skin, ability, learning, then we would also be able to find this single right answer. And I think that this thesis is not true. There can be, if we start with a theory of legal argumentation. I have a section in my theory about cases in which only of the discourses necessity, only one solution is possible. Discourses impossibility and discourses possibility. That both two answers are possible, and therefore we need the institutionalization of courts, in which in the higher level they need the majority principle to decide the case. But I think that there exists a single right answer as Kant calls it, regulative idea. We should always try to find the right answer. And after it has been decided per majority principle in a courtroom procedure, both sides can go on continue. Then the decision is discussed in the legal literature. There the question is, what was right? And therefore, we cannot understand what legal argumentation with this legal decision-making is without the idea of a single right answer.
Atienza has suggested a different approach on principles distinction and therefore a different outcome on the balancing of those principles. In particular, he claims that there are principles that cannot be balanced, like maybe human dignity. Mm-hmm. Which is the current status of this debate?
Well, that is a broad statute. Many people say that the distinction of rules and principles do not exist. Many people say that principles, there exists this distinction, but that there exist principles which cannot be balanced. I think that if something is a principle, and if we define principles as optimization requirements, then, and that is by proportionality analysis. That is, if we apply proportionality analysis to a right, we conceive necessarily this right as a principle that is as an optimization requirement. To say yes to proportionality is to say yes to principles. But you can naturally say no to proportionality analysis. Then you can say also no to principle theory, that is, to the conception of fundamental rights as optimization requirements. Possibility exists, and most persons in the US Supreme Court say this. And then, that should be, for instance, Fred Schauer, just to give this example. Fred Schauer says, and he's very influential on this point, Fred Schauer says that my theory with the weight formula of proportionality and balancing is a very good rational tool of decision making. But completely different than Habermas, who said Dworkin, in the last year, Dworkin said proportionality, in the first years he was full in taking right seriously. Full. This is the greatest advocate for the dimension of weight principles. In his recent writings, for instance, in his book, Is Democracy Possible Here? He said, we should not make balancing, for this is a kind of economic analysis. My God, the balancing of the life of the mother and the night of the fetus has little to do with money. In some cases, but normally not. We can balance everything. And for this reason, Habermas says balancing is irrational. Now, back to Schauer. Schauer says it is very rational, but now he comes with an institutional argument, which is very interesting. But this balancing of constitutional rights should not performed by courts, but only by parliament. That is Schauer's institutional point. The courts, and then he comes very close to Scalia. What are the alternatives? The alternative, that is Schauer's point, is formalism, that is the text analysis. You have to make a text analysis, not an analysis of the matter which has been decided. Textualism, or the alternative Scalia, original intent. If it would be possible to make good decisions only by reference to original intent of the framer of the Constitution and the text of the Constitution, then we would not need all the complicated things with proportionality analysis. But I think originalism and textualism, the text plays, I never have said that the text of the Constitution plays no role. Prima facie, the text is what counts. Against the verdict of the Constitution, we have the right only to decide in extreme cases. And here we can make. And the original intent of the framers of the Constitution is very important. But for instance, in Volume 6, our Constitutional Court said there was homosexuality about adult male was an extremely serious crime in Germany, The death penalty has been abolished in 1945, but 10 years was often given for normal homosexuality between male beings, adults. And the court said, well, the 65 persons who made the German constitution thought that that should be so. And if the original intent would count today, then male homosexuality should be punished very serious in Germany too. There must be changes. There must be changes in the life of a constitution. Then law has one thing in common, not completely in common, but a little bit in common. On the basis of discourse and argumentation theory, there can be a progress. You can have new insights as you have them quite generally in science. And in courts, such things can happen too. And this has happened in Germany with homosexuality in constitutional law.
Unfortunately, we are finishing this conversation, Professor. These are my final questions. A kind of miracles, I think. Yes. Are you aware of the impact your work has made in the academy as well as in the European and Latin American judiciary? Yes. Are you aware how important is your work in Europe and here in Latin America, especially for judges?
I've heard a little bit about it.
Yeah, a little bit. Do you believe that your contribution is comparable to that Kant did to morality or Kelsen to law?
Well, this question I like very much, and I have not had it in this form. Let me start with Kant. Naturally, my theory can be considered as an approach inspired by Kant, and perhaps call it a Kantian approach. And we have sitting a person here who wrote a doctoral dissertation with me in Kiel in Germany, in German language, and she has made exactly this point. That is this. But, and now Kelsen, that is interesting. That is interesting. Kelsen. Kelsen is so great that you cannot be a legal theorist who wants to be taken seriously without not also being to a certain degree a Kelsen. The formal analysis of the legal system, the theory of the ground norm, and many other things. You can learn from Kelsen so much. Only one point is wrong. For instance, he says when, just one, his theory of interpretation is extremely bad. He said, and it's only some pages at the end of the second edition of the pure theory of law. He says, when the wording is unclear, when there is a collision of norms, it's the same as hard, the judge cannot decide the case by legal argumentation. That is, then it is not longer the judge in unclear cases. That's case. The judge does not make what concerns the content a legal argumentation. He makes a legal decision because he is empowered to decide the case. A legal decision on political or ideological reasons. And that is, I think, wrong in Kelsen. And in Kelsen, it is also wrong that he said, my sentence, extreme injustice is no law, is wrong. And I think in the German edition of the second edition, German version of the second edition of the Pure Theory of Law, at page 37, Kelsen said, if in a dictatorship. People are prosecuted for religious, racial, or political reasons. And if they are given in concentration camps, where they have to do each work, and where they are even killed, like in Auschwitz, that can be valid law. That is, ethnical killing can be valid law. That is very nice for the policemen who participate in such killings and who like to kill persons. As they can later say, well, it was valid law, and you cannot accuse me. But I think Kelsen is wrong in this point, and that is what I had in the concept and nature of law in my third book. Therefore, many people say, either you must decide for Kelsen or for Kant. How crazy. If there are good things, theorems, in a comprising work, then you, per definition, you cannot say no to a good argument or a good distinction. That is my answer. Therefore, I like this question, for you need, when you look back in the history, you can connect many things into a new system.
Thank you, Professor. Finally, could you give the judges two pieces of advice when they have to decide hard cases, and two books any judge should have in her or his library?
Nothing to the two books. Okay. I don't want to make that something. But the advice is they should be well prepared. That they should know exactly what is the logical structure of subsumption. They should know exactly what is the logical structure of a norm. They should know as exactly as possible what is the logical mathematical structure of balancing. They should know the forms of arguments in legal discourse. They should know that there are only, like in grammar, there is only a limited number of argumentative structures. A limited number. And they can be filled, this limited number of formal structures, they can fill in with quite different subsets. That is, I think, a good point. And, well, concerning the books, they should read only books in which are at least what concerns legal argumentation.
Not your book, because everybody has your books.
No. They should read only books which are as clear as possible and use logical and mathematical formulas.
Okay, and this is the advertisement. I'm going to invite them to your honoris causa ceremony. Mañana la Universidad del Rosario a las 11 de la mañana invita a la ceremonia de doctor honoris causa que le otorgará el profesor Alexi, entonces están todos invitados. Okay, thank you, Professor Alexi, to sharing us your time, your ideas. It was a real pleasure to have you here. Thank you very much. Un aplauso para el profesor Alexi.